Hey guys, welcome to the Hypertrophy Hustle Show. So this week I'm speaking to James Anthony. So James Anthony is a head coach at JPS Health and Fitness. He's really interested in sort of the obese and sort of overweight population, which is really cool. And I think that's something that we'll dive into quite a lot today. So James is also an MNU certified nutritionist from Mac Nutrition University. So James, something that you've we've talked about a little bit is sort of the obese population, sort of obese clients and sort of overweight or clients with overweight or with obesity. How do you go about sort of when someone comes to you with sort of overweight or obesity? What are the sort of the first steps that you take to go ahead, bringing them into a more sort of healthy area?
Well, first things first, like you got to understand that the second they walk into the gym, like they might not necessarily be very comfortable. So your first job as a coach is to show them around the place, get them comfortable with the gym. Just basically, you might just try and sit them down in a quiet room, just get to know them and get them used to the setting, because it can be very daunting for someone who's obese, got all these active people around, all these weights around that they've never seen. So it might be very important to get them comfortable within the gym. And then from there, you'll just go about investigating as you would as a coach in any kind of consultation, investigating literally like almost everything about them. So like diet history, lifestyle, work, sleep, current diet, things like that. Just essentially, trying to investigate and find out a lot about them and get them comfortable. That's the first point as a coach.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting because with that population, it's like they're so different to the sort of the normal population when we think of in sort of health and fitness. We kind of commonly think, how do I get this person who's like in normal health, how do I get them jacked? And do you find it's generally like a much different goal, and then that usually requires like a much different process?
Yes. So what you're trying to say is that most people that come to the gym as a coach, that your first thought is that they're going to want to get jacked. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Effectively, like they're coming from a point of like, I want to sort of build muscle, or I'm already relatively healthy. When someone's sort of in a position where they're really not that like metabolically healthy, they don't sort of have anything in line health-wise, do you find the process and the first steps are generally quite different?
Well, no, the first step's always going to be very similar in that you're always just going to try and get the background of information of the person. But I can tell you right now, it's like a lot of obese people will come in and still have plans to get jacked, which is possible. But I think firstly, what you have to do is really try and get them to understand or set some realistic goals with them, like weight maintenance. Just getting them stable is a big deal if you're obese. Just getting a little bit of weight off them might be enough to see some really cool improvements in their health, in terms of health markers like hypertension, all these kind of things that can contribute themselves to like cardiovascular disease. So did that answer the question?
Yeah. Do you feel as though it's a better goal at the start to aim for those sort of improving those health markers instead of, well,
Yes.
kind of going to see, do you feel as though like weight on the scale is a good goal to aim for, or do you feel like that's a dangerous goal? Or
I think your first goal with them in terms of their eating, no, I shouldn't say, sorry, not in terms of their eating. The first goal in general is trying to get them to maintenance, get them to maintain their weight. I think weight on the scale is still a very good goal to have. Granted, it's a bit more open-ended in that you're not setting strict targets for them, like we're going to try and lose 5-10 kilos in the next bit of time. You might be like, here's a range that we're going to aim for, or we're just going to aim to lose some weight at this point in time, rather than trying to be strict and already getting them hyper focused on the scale. Because that's probably not the first thing you're going to be looking at. As I said, it's going to be background information, but then also starting to educate them, see what their diet competence, like their nutritional competence is, because they're probably likely going to have some misconceptions, just like most new clients, and that's kind of the first goal. So education, and you can, like, as I said, you can think about trying to already devise a plan that has numbers involved, but I don't think it's your first point of call.
Right. Do you feel like it's a better idea to sort of get them comfortable in the gym, understanding a little bit more around sort of what's a good idea nutritionally?
Mm-hmm.
What sort of things nutritionally do you find commonly are sort of the best first steps to make, or like pretty reasonable assumptions, or does it generally depend on the client and sort of what areas they have low sort of health literacy in?
Yeah, like your main concern is to get them to understand the principles, like get them to understand energy balance, get them to understand the roles and functions of macronutrients, and like, because they'll probably have misconceptions about things like carbs, things like fats, maybe even things like protein. So what you're trying to do first of all is just really educate them that calories matter, and yeah, the roles of those macronutrients and the importance of protein as well. Sorry, I've drawn a blank.
That's okay. Do you feel as though is it kind of like the main, in terms of nutritional principles, you want them to get them to understand pretty fast? What do you think those main sort of pillars are in terms of those kind of things?
I think the main one's going to be calories. You're going to have to get them to understand that, like, certain foods, like the foods they're going to view as good or bad, or the foods they view as bad, they're the foods that are likely going to contain higher calories. They're the foods that are going to likely be less satiating, less nutritious, and probably going to get you to want to eat more of those foods. At the same time, it's like you don't want to allow that terminology to keep occurring, because if they keep viewing foods as either good or bad, well then it's like when they do slip up and when they do eat some of these bad foods, well then they're going to feel like a failure, and they're going to feel like they've kind of gone against the whole plan, when really it is at the end about calories. So you really want to make sure you are teaching them about calories, teaching them that yes, if you'll be able to stick to, let's just say we've given them an amount of calories to stick to, you'll be able to stick to these amount of calories better if you do eat more wholesome diet, more like foods that are higher in protein, foods that are like plenty of fruit and veg, foods that are high in fiber. But you can still continue to lose weight by eating things like fast food, like Macca's, hot chips, chocolate, things like that. You're just going to have a harder time, I would say, because they just take away like more of the calories, and they don't lend themselves to satiety in the end. So, yeah.
You feel like, do you kind of have to put a reasonable amount of emphasis on sort of like, it's okay to eat these foods and making sure 100%. They know that they can fit in? And then why do you sort of see that as one of the things that's quite important? Because it's like, with sort of like, if they can theoretically go and eat McDonald's, it's kind of like, I think it's important, from what I know, it's like it's important to know, like, yes, you can eat it.
Yeah, and that's super important.
There should be no like mental punishment if you eat it.
100%. It's like the anxiety surrounding the food that you eat is probably going to do more damage than the food itself. One thing I like to do is find out what they like to eat, put it in there, account for it. Just takes the stigma away from that food. And then they might see that I've eaten this food, I've sandwiched it between good nutrition, and I've seen weight loss, so I can still eat these kind of foods and lose weight.
Yeah,
that's one thing I really do try and do. But you've just got to take where they're at. So you've investigated at the start. You've gone, all right, this is your overall diet, and you've gone, oh shit, man, like you're eating fast food like 5 times a week. I'm not going to get you to go cold turkey. Yeah. You're very likely not going to be able to adhere to that, because that's just like one of these ingrained habits you've got. It's like you get fast food often. So how about we meet halfway somewhere and go, all right, you can have it 3 times a week. The other 2 times a week, you might have to go out and get some food, cook something. And when you do eat those fast food dinners or lunches, whatever they may be, let's try and make an optimal scenario out of what you could consider to be a suboptimal scenario. So let's see what is on the menu, and how can I better my decision making? Because a lot of the time they'll be like, oh, I like to get a burger and chips. So I'm like, is the burger just as satisfying on its own, or do you have to have the chips? Would you be better off having 2 burgers? It's like when people are like, oh man, I just need chocolate, I need that fix. Well, it's like they've got things where it's like Chobani Flip or something like that now. And it's like you're getting protein, probably like a lesser amount of calories, and you're still getting that chocolate fix. It's like, would you still get your fix if you had this compared to this?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, they would probably do it. I'm like, well, that's probably a better decision.
Yeah. It's like we were.
But you can have the chocolate. It's okay. Like, it's fine to have the chocolate. Just have to account for it.
Yeah, it's kind of thing where it's like, it's good to now see that, like, it's kind of like we've taken all the stigma away from things. It's like we have like an AUT journal club where it's like me and like a few of the exercise science students here, and like we reviewed a study on artificial sweeteners, and it was kind of like, wow, basically the outcome of it was, if you currently like and enjoy artificial sweeteners, cool, keep drinking them. And then basically the study was like, okay, here's 1,500 calories or whatever amount of food that they had the option to eat after they did a study. Like, that was the sort of the framing. Like, it was their reward for doing the study. But then the real study was how much of the food that they ate. And then if they normally drank artificial sweeteners, they would give them artificial sweeteners. And the ones who didn't, they still gave them artificial sweeteners, but none of them drank it. And then they found the ones who consumed artificial sweeteners then went and ate less of the food. So it's just like, it was a pretty cool, like, okay, cool, artificial sweeteners, if you not already drink them, fine, cool. And then they ended up eating less of the food anyway. And it's kind of like, they also gave all the participants the option of water and the option of Coke, normal, regular Coke. And it was like, the ones who didn't consume any artificial sweeteners normally would go and have the Coke, or they'd have the water, and then commonly they'd be consuming more calories overall. And it's like these kind of little hacks that, we can't just use little hacks to make sort of the diet not painful at all, but it's like they can take a lot of the stress off of dieting just by, you don't just have to eat clean foods. Like, there's a lot of like, honestly, technology nowadays is magical. Like, how the fuck do artificial sweeteners exist? Like, they work and they're fine. They're not going to give you cancer. It's cool. And it's just like, that little thing can make such a big difference, I think, for some people.
I think one of the cool byproducts of teaching people about calories and teaching people, especially about like methods for satiety, like getting more protein, more fiber, is that if you, let's say you get them to track and you calculate a deficit, probably a large deficit. If they're obese, you're probably not going to mess around and get like trying to figure out maintenance for a few weeks if someone's obese, because early buy-in is probably is especially important for this population of people. It's like you'll give them what you've calculated to be a large deficit, and they look at it and they go, that's 1,700 calories. That's like 800 more that I've been trying to eat for the last 3 years of my life. Right. You give them that amount of calories, you jack up protein to like 2 grams per kilo body weight, and they're like, dude, I'm so fucking full and I'm losing weight. Like, what are you doing? That's one of the main things you'll find starting out. If you can teach someone about calories, put them in a large deficit, see some weight loss, get some buy-in, and still have them be full, like, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think it like, especially with all this, one of the things that I think is really difficult is when you first get them, and then they like, tracking calories is really fucking difficult if you don't know how to do it properly.
100%, yeah.
And it's like, what is sort of your first steps to try and figure out, like, okay, how do I get them to figure out how to track calories accurately? Yeah, and then also, how do I figure out where their maintenance is? Because it's kind of like, otherwise we're lost.
Well, you got to understand, like, tracking is hard, and most of them aren't going to want to track straight away. And that's totally fine, because in your first few sessions of someone, you'll be doing things like matching foods to macronutrients, trying to figure out like an eating structure throughout the day that they can adhere to, like trying to figure out their eating windows when they're hungry, and how we're going to spread protein throughout the day, how we're going to get a couple servings of fruit and vegetables, or if they're like, they don't eat fruit and veg, trying to find out like the ones that they like. Basically just taking like their current diet and trying to incrementally add in more wholesome foods, if that made sense. So that like that's what you'll be doing pretty much. Yeah, first up is just trying to like match, just really trying to focus on these foods, go to these macronutrients, and yeah.
Do you like to get clients, especially clients that sort of will have a very low level of education around the stuff, and they won't be like for instance, some of the sort of more athlete types, like I'm sure they'll have more sort of knowledge around what is a macronutrient, how do I track calories? It seems, I would guess that they'd have more of a sort of knowledge about it.
Yeah.
Do you like to get clients tracking early on, or do you think it's sort of missing the point, or difficult, or adding a bit too much stress, or does it really depend?
I do personally like to get people to start tracking early on, because it shows you how many calories. It's a very good educational tool to show you what foods lend themselves to what macronutrient. It's like one of the first things people find out is, let's say you've estimated someone's maintenance, and they go, I'm going to track the chocolate I've been eating. Let's say it's like the serving size they've been having is like 500 calories. They're like, holy shit, I thought it was less, and that's 1/3 of my total daily energy expenditure. No wonder I might be overeating, and so it's not lending itself to a lot of satiety. So it's a very good educational tool to start out with. Just to get them to figure out serving sizes for them, portion sizes for them. But it's not going to happen right off the bat. It does require a lot of education. You might have to be the one to plug it in for them in some way. You might have to be, it's like, you're going to have to teach them like a lot of the like kind of like where people fail in terms of tracking, like not adding things like oils or little spoonfuls of this, and trying to show them how much those kind of things can add up over time and kind of like take away the deficit you've created. So it's like, you're going to have to obviously teach them how to track properly, get them to give them a deficit that you think that they can adhere to and that they've agreed upon. And then then they'll get some experience and they'll get some education towards certain foods, certain macronutrients, what foods are just worth it in the end, and what foods should I only have here and there because they're not that filling, super high calories, and they're very tasty.
Yeah. And then it's one thing that I think about quite a lot is, and it's quite interesting, is you'll get people they'll find someone online and they'll present a coherent argument for a certain fad or a certain something or other, and then do you find, will someone come to you commonly with like, okay, here's this thing that I want to try, can you show me how to implement this diet? And then often would it be kind of like, okay, this is why we could try this, and it might work, like for instance like keto, right? It's like it can work and it works, right? But it's like, then that do you find it's better to potentially explain the downsides or give it a go? And then
so you got to make sure they know that it's not working because that specific diet is super special. It's because it's invoking like one of the principles, like energy balance. But like you might have clients, it kind of like rarely ever happens to me, where they're like, I want to do keto, or they're already on keto, and you're just like, and they're like, I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm like, cool, fantastic, keep doing it. And then along the way, you might be like, okay, this is the reason why this diet could work. But here's an alternative way where you can get the same outcome, and try and like sprinkle that in over time. Because if let's say they come in and they're doing keto and it's working, it's like, keep that ball rolling. Just make sure they know why it's working. Like, don't mess that up.
I agree. I think it's important. It's like people will be like, oh, but it's not like keto doesn't work though. It's dangerous. It's like, well, if it's working, it's like I've seen. I think we talked off air around how my classmates, like the first diet they go to is keto, and it's like the thing is though, it has worked for them. It's just
definitely
they don't understand the underlying processes as to why it has worked, and then when they get off it, there can be some issues afterwards. Like it's like go try reintroduce carbohydrates. Like,
yeah, you're gonna gain some weight just purely from that. Like, one of the main reasons why I think like a lot of people like doing keto is because the second they start doing it, they drop a lot of weight, but it's not necessarily fat. When you really, if they're doing a ketogenic diet where it's like they're doing traditional, going below 50 grams of carbohydrate and they were eating like 300 grams, or they're going to drop a lot of glycogen stores. It's like if they have, let's say they have 500 grams of glycogen, which binds to 3 parts of water, well, they can drop 2 kilos right there. And that early buy-in, then they'll go, oh shit, I dropped 2 kilos of fat. This diet is magic. I'm going to carry on with this, not realizing that it's actually a lot of water weight, a lot of stored carbohydrate that's now gone.
Yeah, because it's the kind of thing. It's like we look at any kind of weight loss graph. It's like the moment we start the diet, you'll see a pretty fast drop and then a stall, and then it'll slowly go down.
Yeah,
and it's kind of
100%.
Yeah,
it's sorry.
I got John.
I was just going to say, like, one of the main reasons why, for non-trackers, why like low carb ketogenic diets work is because they not inherently, but they're very likely to make you get your protein intake up, and then that raises satiety big time. They're like, no, it's not that. It's the fact that when you're in ketosis, you're just a fat burning animal, and it doesn't matter what I eat from this point, as long as I stick to these specific foods, I'm gonna keep churning it out. I've had people be like, no, I can eat what I want as long as I stick to these foods. And I'm like, boy, you're going to put on some weight if you actually think about it that way.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think I'm often conflicted about keto because it's like, it's kind of like promising for like a lot of things.
Specifically like epilepsy.
Yeah, like really specific conditions. But I don't even think about that. Those don't even cross my mind. Like, it's more like, for instance, something like diabetes. Like, you have a patient with diabetes, and it's like I do not think, and I would be pretty. It doesn't reverse diabetes. We're pretty prominent on that. That's not possible, except in like very low calorie diet potentially. I'm basically regurgitating what I've heard. This is not even my thoughts. This is just like the general consensus.
Are we all regurgitating?
That is true. Yeah, but it's like, I think it's really useful in a lot of populations, but it's like, I think it's also really easy to be dogmatic with it because it's like
100%.
You have all these people being sort of like pseudo, like Gary Taubes, right? Like pseudo sciencey about it and being like, hey, man, like this shit is magic. Carbs are bad. Like,
that was like the best thing to ever happen for Gary, the keto craze to come back. He's fucking loving it.
Like, yeah, I remember I read his book like before keto really started popping off. His like Case Against Sugar, and I was convinced. Like, what the? And then it was maybe like maybe 6 months before like Joe Rogan started getting on all the keto hype, and then I was just like, holy shit!
That's what it is.
This
like
is magic. Obesity is solved. We fixed it. It's like,
you got to listen to Joe, man. Apparently, got to listen to him.
Yeah,
he knows everything.
I respect him as
very smart dude,
but I think I really do like. I think he can make some good content, but man, he
can miss the trick with nutrition.
That's 100%. And then that makes me wonder, what else is he missing the trick with? It's like, well,
sure.
I would assume a lot of things. It's like I'm assuming you know Jordan Peterson.
I do.
It's like, I like a lot of what he says, but then you listen to him talk anything to do with fitness and nutrition, and it's just ferocious. It's like, shit.
Kind of just comes one of those, like, general population people. It's like, this diet of eating purely meat, it works. It's
just like,
even the greats.
One issue.
Even the greats. It's something about nutrition being dogmatic. I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's because everyone thinks they have the right to talk about nutrition, which is fucked. It's like, it's bad. It's even like, okay, if I went and got a degree that had nothing to do with nutrition and it was just focusing on hypertrophy, and then I started being like a physique coach, it would kind of be like, well, then I would still probably talk about nutrition, but it's like, man, like nutrition's complex as hell. Like, I think it comes off as really simple, especially when you think the evidence-based thing kind of ends at calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
Like, if we think it ends there, which it obviously doesn't, then it's like, you can think it's simple and you can think this is it. And it's just like, well, it's obviously like calories in, calories out is true, but it still is more than that.
100%. It's like when people say you just gotta eat less and move more, and they're just skipping all the complexities of that. Yeah.
It's like fundamentally that kind of might be true, but it's like there's like 18,000 layers to that we don't understand. We don't know everything yet. And it's just like telling someone that does virtually nothing might even be detrimental. Like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the stuff around obesity that's really been sort of mind-blowing to me recently is like more of the, like kind of the pseudo political stuff, like kind of political stuff, like the conversations around sort of health at every size. It's like, I think it's interesting because it's like, well, it's pretty important to like not convey a message of like guilt. And it's like, I think the idea is misconstrued. I think, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but it's like the health at every size movement isn't ideally are not around saying that you can be healthy at every size. It's like it's more it's not that you're having optimal health at every size. It's that you can be healthier at every size, and you should still strive for health at every size. But I don't think they're trying to say it's healthy to be obese.
Yeah, I do think it is. Definitely should strive to be healthy at every size. And also, it depends how you kind of like define health and how they're measuring that in those studies. It's like if they're taking just objective measurements of health, like blood pressure and HbA1c or something like that, or blood lipids, then it's like they might be, but it's like subjectively, or their mental health might be it's shattered. So it's like, are they really healthy?
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things that we miss. And you actually wrote an article on this, that was the smoothest transition of my life. So do you want to sort of go through that article? What do you kind of think are the main kind of like, what are some really good indicators of health? And do you think we kind of missed the ball in health for about health for fitness?
Health for fitness,
wow,
or health in general?
Like as the fitness sort of population, you feel that we kind of missed the ball.
Definitely, I think we're very, very drawn to our physical health, and we're missing out on all the other facets of health, like psychological health, like social health, financial, what else is there? Intellectual health. Like we're really kind of like zoned into just one facet of it, and we are missing a lot of the bigger picture in the end, most definitely.
Yeah, I feel like especially in today's society, it's incredibly important to embrace those aspects. It's like you look at like everyone's attached to their phone. Everyone's like, you look at the rates of like depression going up, and it's like, well, depression. Like there's this really cool thing I actually learned in uni. It was like the correlation between being depressed, being obese, and having a long-term condition is very, very high. And if you have one, it increases the likelihood of the others.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, people always act like sort of mental health is like this thing that kind of doesn't matter for sort of physique, or like it's just not a part of the conversation. But it's like, well, if you're depressed or you're like crippled by anxiety, the likelihood that you're going to eat well and all that is pretty fucking low.
I think one of the first things you notice when you start coaching is that a lot of what gets you results is like as an indirect consequence of things that are outside of your scope. Like, are they taking care of their mental health? Because as you said, if they're anxious, depressed, if everything else besides the stuff they're doing with you in the gym isn't going well, then it's like that's going to affect what's happening in the gym and how well they adhere.
And I think it's kind of like, it's interesting as health practitioners, because it's like, well, you have like medical health practitioners and you have fitness health practitioners. And this is something I'm endlessly fascinated by, because it's like the sort of more like medical side doesn't understand the fitness and nutrition side at all commonly. I find it's a massive like disconnect. And then you have like the fitness side, which doesn't really understand the medical side as much. And it's like, it's reasonably frustrating, I'd say.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
Yeah.
You get like overweight, obese people going to the doctor, and they're just like don't eat dairy, eat less, move more. And then they come to us and we're trying to figure out things like, I don't know, like, yeah, things like how well they're tolerating glucose or something like that. Definitely.
I feel like fitness professionals, it would pay more for fitness professionals to look more at things like blood glucose, like blood pressure, like general markers of health and sort of just physical health, I guess. Because I feel as though, like, you have a lot of bodybuilders in the UK, right? And they're very focused on their blood glucose. And I think from them, I get why they're doing it. And they're kind of more focused on markers of health. And I kind of agree, but I think they've got the wrong rationale a lot of the time.
What do you think the rationale is?
Well, commonly when they talk about it, it's more like they're already a relatively, and it's usually bodybuilders in the off season, right? So it's I do get that, and they're pushing up relatively high. These are commonly assisted, but also unassisted lifters, meaning steroids, and I find commonly it feels as though, and when they talk about it, it's sort of like their ability to uptake glucose, and like there's a risk that they won't uptake it as well. Yeah, I'm commonly doubting that. Like these are also the same kind of people, and I'm not calling anyone
it's like they have more muscle.
Yeah, they have a shit ton of muscle. Like, what's the best way to get glucose out of the blood? Like, lift weights, grow muscle. Yeah, it's just like, what's a pretty surefire way to not get diabetes? Lift weights.
Yeah.
Like, I was looking at a bunch of research recently about sort of hypertrophy and diabetes, and it's like, well, if we can actually develop a program that the general population can actually understand and do and adhere to, that's diabetes solved. It's like, obviously it's not that simple, but it's just like, I don't think lifters who have been lifting, they're already relatively healthy. Their body fat percentage isn't over like 30%.
Yeah.
Like relatively normal body fat percent range. It's like,
I don't think glucose testing is super necessary. I do think testing things like blood pressure is important, and doing that pretty regularly. It's like even weekly you can do that. If you buy your own cuff, you just have to buy it once, and then you can take that daily. But things like glucose, probably not so much. Things like blood lipids, probably not so much, unless you're doing long bulks, in which case, as you accumulate fat, as you accumulate a lot of stresses on the body because you're doing a lot of voluminous training and you're doing a lot of eating, it might be a good idea. But that's one of those things you can cover in, say, like if you do like a quarterly or 6-month blood tests, because at the same time, then you can test things like glucose tolerance, and you can test your blood lipids, and you can also get a basic blood panel of your nutrition to see if you're deficient in anything. So I think that's just a very good idea for anyone ever, because you can learn so much from this one test. And I think it's always a good idea to see if you are nutrient deficient. It's probably the main thing, because you can get all these results out of the one test. At least here you can. I don't know what it's like over there, but in New Zealand,
over in New Zealand, I'm pretty sure we can. I probably should. I every now and then, I obviously at a podiatry, at university, as I do podiatry, I can test my blood glucose. Haven't tested my HbA1c, which I would say is an issue, right? It's like people are using blood glucose as a marker for HbA1c, and it's kind of like, well, I get it kind of works, but it's like, and it's like a pretty good measure. Like if you measure your blood glucose and you haven't eaten recently and you haven't exercised recently and it's like above 7, it's like, oh, like maybe that's something to think about. If it's not around like 4 to 6, kind of, it's like, well, maybe think about that. But it's like HbA1c is like just like shit tons better.
100%.
Like it's just like, I guess
8 to 12 weeks of
it's just like it doesn't even compare. Like it's just like you can have a little bit of sugar on your thumb and then you test your blood glucose and it's wrong. It's like, and then it says, okay, your blood glucose is 50 or some shit just because you have sugar on your thumb or some random shit like that. It's just like, Yeah,
It's testing acute things, like if you had a low carb day the day before, then high carb meal, then potentially, it can be higher. And that's just showing a picture of that rather than the whole picture. So
I think it's just so complex that we barely understand it. It's like people act like it's just like, okay, I eat carbs, and now an hour later my blood glucose is going to spike. And if I can tolerate, if I have like good insulin sensitivity and a good ability to tolerate carbohydrates, I'll get that out of my blood pretty quickly, pretty easily. But it's just like, this shit is not that simple. Like, it's just not. As a bodybuilder, and it's been especially like unnatural bodybuilders, it's like 100% you should be getting all this shit done. But it's like a blood glucose test does not measure your insulin sensitivity. And like, oh, it does obviously, but it's like, it's pretty like, if you do that post-exercise, like they do it, the common thing is they'll do it post-exercise, then post-meal, like an hour post-meal.
Yeah.
That's pretty, like, it's a pretty good strategy, but it's just like, man, there's so many factors going into that. Like, if you seriously care about that, get an HbA1c. Like,
yeah.
And then, same thing with blood pressure though. It's like, my friend, do you know Josh Bridgman?
No,
he's a very good bodybuilder in the UK, and it's like he'll and it's common among these bodybuilders. He's an assisted bodybuilder. He's open about that. I'm not like.
Can I pause you for a sec?
Yeah, easy.
So I got people. I need to tell them to stop talking. I'll be 1 sec. It's super loud. I did.
Get him.
Yeah, I had to.
So he's a bodybuilder in the UK, and it's like he'll always measure his blood pressure. He'll always do things like that, and it's just like, okay, he's an assisted lifter. He's doing these things, and it's within a good range. And he's sort of like constantly checking these things. And I was talking to him last night about it, and it's like, I think in some populations, focusing on the minutia is kind of a waste of time. Like doing your blood glucose, if you're like 6 months into lifting, it's like you're wasting your damn time. Just lift more and eat better. It's like, this minutia doesn't matter. But I think once you get to a certain point of like, oh, I'm a bodybuilder trying to get to the IFBB stage, it's like, well, that's a different story to like obese client who just came in. It's like, those are different populations, and we don't need optimal. Like, we need adherence. It's just, I think we always love to strive for optimal in fitness, but it's like, well, life is not optimal at all.
Absolutely. No, you just got to figure out where you are and find out that next incremental step. It's like, for the most part, like taking like glucose tests, it can be handy initially. You're gonna have to take it a few times to actually get the real story, or take a proper one like HbA1c. But in the end, it's not going to really. Well, let's say if you had no predisposing factors to diabetes. If you had no predisposing factors and you took it and then you found out, oh wait, and you did it properly, then something's wrong. Well, then that's a good outcome. But if you've got predisposing factors, you test it and you have it, or you're pre-diabetic, you're diabetic. Well, it's probably not going to change because these predisposing factors are probably likely going to be overweight. It's probably not going to change the path you take anyway. Like, you're going to be aiming to do more training, aiming to eat a little bit less. Find a sustainable way to eat less. So that's probably not the one most people need to focus on. I think like blood pressure, getting a nutrient panel here and there. If you're not scared of needles, fantastic.
It's kind of like, I think we can miss the forest for the trees a lot. It's like, especially with programming for like hypertrophy as well. It's like, there's so much shit that like, this is where like I am definitely team RIR, like submaximal training, right? It's like, I think it comes to a point where we kind of had to be like, well, some people can't train to failure because they just don't know how, and then assessing what kind of population. Is there like a method you like to start with, or sort of training ideas you like to start with clients when they come to you and they've never lifted weights before, What kind of strategies do you like to first sort of?
Are we talking about like specifically obese? Because then it's gonna change.
Yeah,
Okay.
Specifically the obese.
When they've come in, as I said, they're probably not going to be comfortable. What I actually like to do, if they're really obese, they're not going to get a whole lot out of resistance training initially, or they're not going to get the main benefits that you want to see out of resistance training, in terms of like helping them become more insulin sensitive or getting them moving more is just a big deal. And you can actually, if you get them doing resistance training straight up, they're going to pull up super sore and they're going to move less, and that's not what you want. So one of the things I like to do whilst I'm educating them, whilst I'm speaking to them, getting to know them, is I'll literally spend the first few sessions just walking with them on the treadmill. Like they'll understand. Like, as I said, they're not going to be probably super comfortable. They might not even want to be on the gym floor yet. And they'll like the fact that you're giving a shit, asking a lot of questions, making a move. So that's one of the things I like to do. Yeah, first up, it could be for the first few sessions, could be for the first 10 sessions. This is if they're really obese and maybe they're novice to training. If they're obese and they like training, they've done training, they want to get straight into it. Yeah, you get straight into it, and you can still educate in between sets and reps and all that. But that'll be one of my approaches towards that population of people.
Yeah, I like that approach. It's
just whilst you're walking with them, get them on a bit of an incline. Just like, hey, can you press that button, turn it up a few more in between talking.
Kind of like getting them comfortable even like interacting with equipment in the gym.
Yeah, 100%.
Because that's something we don't even think about. It's like, I take my friends to the gym because they're like, hey, James, can you help me get jacked? I'm like, yeah, sure, come to the gym with me. And like, I'll be doing my session while they're doing theirs, and they're like, hey, how do I like change handles on this cable? I'm like, holy shit, like, like I didn't even think about these things.
Yeah. You've got to be very cautious of that as a coach, that someone can really not know their way around the gym and not be comfortable. And the best thing you can do for them sometimes at the start is just to talk to them within that environment in an easy form, like walking with them. So that's. And then once you get into training, well, it's like you're going to have to find the movements that work for them. Depending on their size, there might be a lot of movements you can't do, that they won't be safe or that they won't want to do.
What kind of movements do you find are usually like pretty good ideas to sort of steer clear of? Like, for instance, when I think of like skinny little dudes who just want to get jacked, it's like, I know the kind of movements that I'm thinking of in my head, where it's like, well, that can work, that also we shouldn't waste too much time there. But it's like, do you find there's certain movements where it's like they're commonly not the best idea or a difficult idea at least?
I think it's really, like dependent on the person. Like, I have obese people doing deadlifts and they do it just fine, and I can see the structure, everything's moving well. It just like any other client, like depends on how they move, their mobility, what they're comfortable with, what they like. Do what they like. But it's like you might say things like, probably deadlifts might not be something they're going to do straight up. Hard, like technical patterns, we're going to do a lot of movements. It might be more movements that are easy to perform. They're still stimulating. It could be like as simple as like a leg extension, some presses, some rows, rather than doing squats, bench, dead, big three. It's probably,
This is where I love a leg press. It's like, everyone who follows me on Instagram knows I literally just post leg press videos.
Yeah, so, you do. They've definitely noticed that.
And because it's like, I mean, for me it works because I've got scoliosis and like spine issues.
Yeah,
so
right.
But it's like, you look at people like diabetics, right? And you look at like, or like overweight population. It's like, I think getting them doing a leg press could be way easier, and it's fucking fantastic. It's just, to get people to leg press correctly, I think is really difficult for some reason. And I think,
I also just think, if they're really big, putting them inside a leg press might not feel great for them.
Yeah, exactly.
So just be aware of that.
Yeah, it's kind of,
like if I had your range of motion on the leg press, I'd be doing it every day as well.
Well,
so
the thing is, it didn't start like that though, right? People always say to me like, holy shit, your range of motion. But it's like, I wear lifting shoes. I've thought about my foot placement so much. I warm up a shit ton. I'm really pulling myself into that seat. I think I don't know. I think people. One day I want to make like an ebook on like leg press. I'll collab with Steve. And me and Steve will make a leg press guide or something. Or Charlton Banks. Go look at his leg press depth. It's fucked.
Will do.
It's literally insane. Like his
You know what?
his soleus is touching his hamstring, and it's like his foot is like pressed up against his shin.
That's
It's
awesome.
like it's insane. And he's doing like 12 plates each side. It's like Jesus Christ. Like
that's stimulating.
Yeah.
My God.
I don't know. Do you feel as though leg press wouldn't be generally the patient's pretty overweight? Do you feel like it's not really that useful, or?
I think it can be very useful, but they might not be comfortable doing that movement.
Right. Yeah.
Straight up. Yeah. As I said, it's always, you've got to get cater to that and consider that. But if they can do it and they're comfortable doing it, like it's a very good exercise, very stable exercise. If they get good range of motion, it's worth it. Do that.
Yeah. I agree. It's kind of like, well, some people are going to be really comfortable doing some things. Like, do you find rows commonly work pretty well? Like, it's kind of like a pretty easy movement. You can set them on a cable row, and then they can it's not too uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely. That's probably something I'll have in there most times. I don't think you can go too wrong with that one.
Yeah. Do you find?
I don't really want to pick certain movements that they can do.
No.
So it's all dependent.
I generally assume the people listening to this understand the nuance of these things, but maybe I'm being a little too charitable. Love you guys, whoever's listening. But one thing that I think is quite important is when it comes to sort of relative intensity and programming for obese populations, how do you go about sort of programming sort of how far from failure? How do you generally give them do you give them a hard rule to stick to? Do you even think about it at the start, or do you set them like an adamant rep range, or if they've just never touched weights in their life before? How do you go about approaching general intensity?
You can do proximity to failure or something like that. That's something I'd probably do mostly use like reps in reserve. But it's still like initially trying to get the technique down pat with lighter weights. You might not do that first up. You've got to see. Remember, we're talking about obese populations. Like you might think there's 5 reps in reserve, but they're like puffed out. So you'll be looking for things like that. But I do think reps in reserve would be a useful tool beyond the training you've initially done to gather some good techniques on the lifts that you've found that work for them.
Yeah, I think it's one of the populations where I've thought about it a lot theoretically, and like I've thought about sort of, okay, what is optimal? And then it's like, in reality, it's like optimal does not matter whatsoever.
It's like you're doing so well just having him in the gym, doing some movements. It's like, honestly, like I'm more concerned about is what I'm teaching them sinking in rather than how hard am I pushing them in the session? Because you're not going to want to push them too hard.
No.
It's submaximal training. You don't want to drive them into the ground so they can't move the next day. That's so counterproductive to the goal. It's like I'm more concerned
really
about.
Important to understand.
Yes. I'm more concerned is how's the plan going? Whatever you've set in motion. They're the kind of things I'm talking about with obese clients in between sets. That's the main thing I'm concerned about, because for like the main thing that's going to help them is for them to lose weight, and well, the main thing for that is calories, and are they sticking to the plan? So that's what the session is for in my mind, and the fact that we're getting some training in is awesome. Like an awesome added bonus.
Yeah. I really like that sort of mindset, because it's like I think people want to do both, and it's like it's definitely a good idea to do both, but it's like the main area that's probably causing obesity, I would say, is not really just a lack of exercise. It's just like there's all these other factors.
It's the lack of education, the environment that they're in, the obesogenic environment that we're all in now. The home environment, like they're the things you're really trying to target at this point in time. The thought process behind food, the way they speak about food, the terminology they use. They're the main things you're trying to target.
And I feel like it's really important to just kind of nail those things. It's like, well, if we can get them to understand this kind of stuff, it's like, it's really cool. Like I've had a lot of conversations recently around sort of like, how do we solve obesity with like, is there a solution we can think of that can solve obesity, like without having to have one-on-one direct conversations with everyone? And it's like, so education, I think on a mass scale is going to be very hard to make get everyone educated to just lower the rates of obesity. Like it's a pretty difficult, but then it's like, there has to be some kind of thing we can do mass scale. But then it's like, you think education one-on-one is fucking fantastic, because it's like, how else do people learn? It's like, like someone spends 40 minutes with someone to learn sort of like, how can I eat something a little better? It's kind of like, then I think they'll make more progress towards actually learning instead of being told things by the TV or whatever. It's frightening, but it's also like so exciting, because I know we can make so much progress, but it's also like one-on-one is a whole different beast to actually like a mass scale thing, which is like, it almost seems impossible. Like I feel like the one-on-one stuff, we know people can do it, right? It's like, it's possible, but the mass scale stuff just feels as though.
So I don't quite get what you're trying to say with the mass scale stuff. So like, what are some of the options that you're thinking? Like, what do you mean by mass scale?
Maybe it's conversations I've had recently around sort of like, okay, like just okay, even if we just look at pre-diabetics and sort of outcomes to sort of make them not get diabetes, not get full-blown diabetes. It's like,
but that's kind of different to what we're talking about, because you can be overweight, obese, and not diabetic.
Exactly, yeah. So it's more like, what can we do for that whole population? How can we generally get rid of the obesogenic environment? It's like, fuck.
I think you just said it.
Like it kind of has to. And it's mainly just like, I might even cut this part out because I'm rambling, but it's more like,
that's cool.
It's more like, okay, here's the obesogenic environment.
Yeah.
Can we change it through education? I fucking doubt it. Like, so look at like socioeconomic status and like the prediction that has the likelihood you'll be obese. It's like fucking huge. Yeah. And then it's like, how do we fix that? Probably like politics and policy, but it's like, how do we get that to occur? That's fucking hard. Like, because I think it's against the interest of all the like corporations. So it's like, I don't know, highly pessimistic about it, but it's fascinating. But yeah, should we finish off here? I'll probably cut that last bit out because I just went on.
I don't know. Do you want to finish off now?
Yeah. Should we finish off here? So where can people find you? Do you have can people go to a certain link for coaching or anything like that? And if you do, I can just pop it in the show notes. And where can people find you on Instagram, online, social media?
So you can probably see some of my stuff on the JPS Health and Fitness website. Just type that into Google. In terms of Instagram, new to the game, but it's James_Anthony7, I believe. That's all, man.
Hey guys, thank you very much for listening to this episode. I hope you give us a review or you really enjoyed the episode. Let me know any feedback. I'm always open to any criticism, anything like that. Reach out to me on Instagram at James_Walsham, or if you'd like to follow my business account, follow at the Hypertrophy Hub. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you would like to help the show, there's a list of ways to do so in the show notes, but if you're wondering how, the best thing to do is just give us a review on iTunes or just let me know how the show can be improved. Thank you very much.